And welcome to From the Archive Live. My name is Greg Bach, and thank you very, very much for joining in tonight. We like to do these from time to time and just have casual conversations about stuff that we find very interesting, that to do with British television, Doctor Who, whatever. And so today we're going to be talking about something that I did a lot of back in the 1980s and 1990s and probably going into the early 2000s, which was videotape trading. And we're going to reminisce about our experiences. And also, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this is a very interactive forum. So if you have memories or you have comments or anything like that, leave a comment. We'll put it up on the screen. We'll react to it. We'll talk about it. We'll just have a nice conversation and kind of see where things go. But I'm not talking about this alone. I'm going to have a couple friends join me today who we have had a lot in common in this subject in particular. And the funny thing is that we're all here talking about it now, and we've all been, a part of like our lives now for a long time. But it started off very separate in terms, especially videotape trading, but how we all got to know each other and became like, friends. So I'm going to bring in, first of all, Mike. Hey, Mike, how are you doing?
Doing well. And you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And Mike and I go back quite a long ways, actually. And Mike had been doing a site amongst many things. He knits scarves. He does a lot of amazing things. But I remember back in the 90s in particular, in the early 2000s, you did the Doctor Who Wave Archive. Mm-hmm. Is that still going, or is that now gone?
Oh, it's been long gone, sadly. I'm not sure anyone has any use for wave files anymore.
You know what's funny about that? I was thinking about it today, and I kind of consider that to be kind of like almost early memes in a sense, because you would go in and you would pick like the prime stuff that was being said in an episode, like the great quotes and stuff, and that would be out there as a wave file. And what's really interesting, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about a little bit today, that we're talking about going from videotape to a wave file. There wasn't DVDs, there wasn't like electronic files of these episodes, so you had to kind of really go a long way about it to mm-hmm. get these done.
Yeah, no, it was the invention of the microphone plug to be able to go from a VHS machine to a computer was just like amazing. And you're right, it was very meme-like, and you just kind of scour the episodes looking for just the right kind of quote to throw in there. And it's completely nerdy, but it was tons of fun doing it at the time.
And that's what we all are, right? Our nerds.
Oh gosh, yes.
Nerds at heart. I want to also bring in Robert, who has done so much in the fan community for so long. And one of the things is being instrumental with the distribution of reconstructions in the 1990s and more than that. But we'll just kind of leave it at there for the moment. How are you doing today, Robert?
I'm okay.
Did you have wine? Did I see?
Yes. Have a nice bottle right here.
What do we have today?
It is a Robert Mondavi that has been aged in a rye barrel, so it's really nice and rich.
Okay, well that sounds good. I wish I could have some. I've kind of moved away from it for the moment a little bit. Let's talk about videotape trading. Now, once again, folks, I'd like to invite you to be part of the conversation, because this is, we're going to talk about how it was kind of for us and just kind of the general feel around the time and whatnot. But also, this is a pretty heavy U.S. influence, and I'm just We know that there's a big, you know, obviously through the UK, other places, well, Australia. But so, you know, tell us your story also. Let us know what's going on. But, you know, the one thing that I kind of felt was missing in Czech's Lies and videotapes was a U.S. perspective on it, because I think it's very unique, especially in the 1980s, because we have the difference in formats from PAL to NTSC. You know, the frame formats, everything else is a little different. Why don't we just actually start, Mike? How did you, I mean, what did you do that got you into even thinking that I'm just going to collect Doctor Who on video and going to try to find, it's not even just like taping it off the air. You had to go and find people who would get you what you needed. How did that go for you? How did you start that off?
Well, and of course, you nailed it. That's exactly how it started. You know, you began taping off of your local PBS station. And so I remember going through and collecting up as much Tom Baker as I could get. But when they swung around and did Pertwee, they did a limited package. So, for example, my first John Pertwee Third Doctor story was Inferno. And then later I found through the program guide that, oh my gosh, there's like 3 stories before then. And how do I get a hold of those? And so yeah, it was kind of like, you know, growing up in a small town in Iowa, that I was the only Doctor Who fan in about 30 or 40 miles. So it took a while to realize that there were other people out there, and other people might have videotapes, and maybe we could do some trading. One of the early inroads for me was actually the old Doctor Who Appreciation Society. There was like a publication they put out, the
Doctor Who Appreciation Society or Fan Club of America?
Fan Club of America. That's
so that'd be the Whovian Times.
Yes. So I started gathering up Whovian Times, and I noticed they had classifieds in there when I was doing the crossword puzzle, because that's how cool I was in the 80s. And
you're just as cool now too.
Well, thank you. And I was kind of shocked when you used the F word to describe me. Friend. So
they're just words, Mike. Don't worry about it.
I think we got this recorded somewhere. But so I noticed in their classified ads that they had occasionally someone who said that they would be looking for, you know, someone to trade tapes with, and I thought, well, why not? And I dug up the old Whovian Times just to see, you know, what I had written down on it, and I had circled a few folks. And back then, I mean, there wasn't email, there wasn't, you know, and no one was publishing phone numbers in the classified, so it was an address, and you'd write a letter, and hopefully a few weeks later you might hear back. And so for me, that was kind of the start of just reaching out through there, just because I was so isolated geographically otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Things started to change a bit when my family moved up to Minnesota, and I was closer to the Twin Cities and could actually meet face-to-face with folks.
And you were up by St. Cloud, right? Weren't you in Sartell, or were you in St. Cloud?
Back in the day.
Brainerd, weren't you?
Brainerd, yeah. So it was about 2 hours away. So we moved up to Minnesota in 1986, the fall of 86. And then in October, the Twin Cities had their Two Doctors convention with Colin Baker and Patrick Troughton. And I actually didn't connect with people there at that event, but, you know, gathered up a bunch of merchandise and started seeing flyers for like different fan clubs in the Twin Cities. And then, you know, basically whined and complained to my parents until they agreed that, okay, we'll drive you down to the cities on one of those weekends and you can go and attend one of those viewing parties. And that's really when things started to pick up, and I was actually like meeting people face to face. And I remember one of the first times it was as simple as I was having a conversation with the person next to me about like trying to get the last 3 Tom Baker stories, because I, you know, didn't have those currently on VHS at the time. And this person just stood up and announced in front of the whole room, yeah, so-and-so, you know, Mike Rogers here is looking for some tapes to trade. And literally it was like that. And our friend Pete, who I think you remember here, Greg, stood up and came over and we talked, and that got the ball rolling.
Wow. Mm-hmm. It's by happenstance in some ways.
Pure luck. I mean, it's just, you just happen to be in the right place, you know, at the right time, and you meet the right person, and then it goes from there.
What about you, Robert? How did you get involved? How did you start? Because did you start later than us?
Well, probably, because I mean, before I was taping all of Doctor Who off the air, and I had a lot of people coming to me wanting to get copies of what I have or borrow my tapes. But I remember the very first time that it kind of got into the world of tape trading. It kind of had eluded me before this. I had gone to several Doctor Who conventions, and sometimes in the dealer's room you'd see these pirate videos, and you buy, and they'd have some like horrible quality stuff on them. But I went to, yes, like those, to A Day with the Doctor. The Friends of Doctor Who put on A Day with the Doctor 2 in Cleveland. And they were showing, Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy were there. And after they had finished their speech and were out signing autographs, they showed in this theater, I believe it was Reign of Terror Part 1, and then Faceless Ones Episode 3, I believe, and Evil the Daleks Episode 2. And I was amazed. At that point, I knew these episodes existed. I just didn't think they haven't been released on video. How do people get a hold of these? This is the first I knew that these orphaned episodes were out there in the wild, and I made it my mission that day to track down who had brought those and get his name and contact information. And I made sure that, yes, I went and I tracked him down, got his contact information. He was telling me about all the things that he had, and he would have to send me a list. And just like you said, Mike, it's back in the days when, you trade back and forth these letters and have to wait a long time for things to come back to you. And so, yeah, I went home and sent away, a blank VHS so he could put these episodes on for me. And then he sent me back the full list of what he had, and just started to trade with him, which then, again, none of my local friends had any of these, so they all wanted to get copies too. And it just kind of took off from there. But that was my story. And I was even more isolated than you, I think, Mike, because I was at the point where I grew up. I was living in Amish country in Ohio. It was the middle of nowhere. There were literally no other Doctor Who fans around. So yeah, I was very isolated, and I had gone to a few events. I remember going to one of the PBS stations that was on the other side of Ohio, down by the Ohio River. They had advertised that there was going to be a local fan meeting, and I had arranged to go this. I was still in high school, so I had planned to go down for this. It was a 4-hour drive, and I remember because another PBS station I had just started airing the entire Pertwee run, and so I was able to take a copy of the black and white version of Terror of the Autons, which hadn't been shown on this other PBS station where I was going to. So I was able to bring something, and I was surprised. I don't think anybody asked me for a copy of that thing. But again, it's the same thing. Because you're taking and sharing it. You're not necessarily trading, but you are sharing it with other fans and that. So, but that's how I started to meet people. And then I had things that they wanted, and they had things I wanted. And then that all kind of blew up later with the internet. As you know, we're meeting and be able to connect with people that were in England or in Australia. So
it really does. And for me, I had been taping some Doctor Who off of the air. I'm in Minnesota, and our station was showing it movie version. And I went to Time Festival 1988 in St. Paul, and I knew that there is stories that were missing, episodes that were missing. But being relatively new to it in 1988, I wasn't exposed to the Doctor Who magazines, like how to get them and stuff. So and there's a lot of information I really didn't know. I knew that stuff was missing, but I guess I never really understood that there were maybe still some episodes that still existed from a story. All I know is that the PBS station KTCA did not show those stories. So I went to Time Fest. And I went into the video room a couple times just to see what's going on there, just because it's like, oh, why? In a way, it was like, why would you have a video room? Because, I mean, the stuff is being shown on TV. But then I went in, and one of the things I noticed first time was Color Daemons, which was Eric Hoffman had been guested at that convention. So that's probably where that came from, because that was his claim to fame, to come to a lot of conventions, was I'll bring my off-air color demons. And it's like, ooh, okay, which, that was a big deal at the time. Also, I saw Shada in there, the Ian Levine 1985 version of Shada, which I was like, oh, I mean, you knew what it was immediately, but you didn't realize that would be able to get out. But what really did it for me was I watched, I came in on a Sunday morning, because I didn't actually stay at the hotel. I was like 13 years old. My dad would drive me down to St. Paul every day because, I'm not going to stay. I didn't have friends at these conventions either. I didn't know anybody in fandom at all at that time. And I go into the video room a Sunday morning, and I had never seen it before, but I instinctively knew what it was. And it didn't have Cybermen in the scene that I saw, but it was 10th Planet Episode 3 with Ben and Polly, trying to, watch over this unconscious doctor in the bed, and a guard comes in, and Polly's hiding in another bed and all that stuff. And I thought, oh gosh, I didn't even know. And that was kind of like the Robert moment of like, I need these in my life. I need to have these. If someone else can have them, why can't I have them? Even at 13 years old, it became an obsession for me to get these episodes. It wasn't like, that'd be kind of nice to have someday. It wasn't like that at all. It was truly an obsession. And, that was July of 1988. By November of 1988, I met a guy through the Hooniversity, which was the fan club I belonged to. And by that point, I started getting myself involved with it, like actually got involved with fandom. And a guy by the name of John Lang had lent me, which is absurd to think, but when you see the quality, you're gonna be like, yeah, who cares? But he lent me a bunch of tapes of what we called the archive episodes back then. I mean, they're what we call now the orphan episodes. Everything's in an archive, so it doesn't really make sense. But these are camera copies, and these were, episodes played off of a PAL TV with an NTSC camera pointed at them, so you didn't have to worry about a conversion of different formats and whatnot. And what would happen is that you'd get this flicker effect. And, because I love you all so much, here's an example from my tapes from way back I made back in 1988, which really shows how far we've come. Now, Mike and Robert, and Robert, I don't know if you ever got into the camera copy side of things, but I mean, quite honestly, just having that was exciting to me. I mean, that was like, I felt like king shit, you know what I mean? It just like, oh, look at this, I have these, I wanted to see these. I never thought I would see these. Mike, how was that like for you? I mean, did you get those type of things, like a lot of camera copies back in the beginning?
Absolutely. I was in that chain, somewhere in that line of folks of, trading tapes, getting copies of them, watching the quality degrade with each copy that you work your way through. But yeah, and here's a funny little side note. I was at Time Fest as well in Minnesota. I was not in charge of the video room, but I was volunteering in there and providing some of the tapes. So, that there is a possibility that you and I locked eyes and then glanced away from each other briefly at that moment, because I don't think we knew each other yet at that point.
No, I didn't know anybody. And it was, and just to kind of jump ahead in the story a little bit, because like I said, we all now know each other very well. But like, I met Mike first, then I met Robert later, and you two corresponded during probably the Reconstruction era, so to speak. But I don't know if you really connected too terribly much until Robert moved up here, and actually until like we all moved to St. Michael, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
when we didn't know that you were living in or working in St. Michael, Mike.
That's true. You were working in St. Michael for a while, weren't you?
You should just assume if it's got the word Michael in it that I am somehow affiliated with it.
That is unfortunate. I did not think of it that way. Yes, absolutely.
With the camera copies too, like you're always on a quest to try to find a better generation copy.
Yes,
where you could hear it a little better, see it a little better. I can't remember exactly when we saw some of our first actual converted episodes where they converted from the UK format to the US format, but it took a long time. And so you were right, like the flickering episodes were like gold.
And I know Robert wants to say something. I'm just going to jump in real fast. It was also showing how our contacts improved also,
Mm-hmm.
because that was always kind of like, that's where, it was like, teenage boys and girls go to the dance to meet up and stuff. We go to conventions to find, people who might have better quality copies of the Moonbase,
Yep.
Well, Robert, what were you going to say about
actually that kind of leads into what I was talking about, because I see here, Tobias made a comment about that, he managed to put together his Doctor Who collection without having to pay any pirates. And that's, and there's both pirates and then there's the other traders. And again, you would trade in certain circles, and depending on what you had, I mean, there are people that would shut you out just because they, you didn't have anything they had. What you were 2 years behind them, and so they already had everything you had, usually in better quality, and they didn't want to trade with you because that. Now that's where I was saying the person that I met, who lived in Indiana, I believe, he really didn't have any of those hangups. It was, I could ask him for anything, and he'd be like, "Okay, yeah, I've got this, and here, give me a copy." And so it was. I managed to amass this collection that then I had, and it started me out from the point of view of like, okay, now it's your responsibility to share it on too. Mm-hmm. And so I never was, that pretentious about like, if I have it, I want to, if you want a copy, sure, fine. So, but then you did have pirates that were selling at the conventions and things, which I always still pick those up because you never know if you're going to get a slightly better copy or a generation up or two.
This is a good tape. And folks, I just want to read what's on here, because Robert, you've had this tape also. I don't know, Mike, if you ever got this tape. You might just be on higher ground, Mike, and just be like, I would never pay for it. I did pay for it. I paid for it probably more than what anyone would really want, but this had the 10th Planet Episode 1, the Hartnell the Shroud Regeneration clip, Evil of the Daleks 2, Wheel in Space 6, Invasion of the Dinosaurs 1, which I want to talk about a little bit later in particular. Mind of Evil, the 6-minute clip, which I thought was one of the strongest things on here. It looked really, really good color-wise. Variations on the theme. Galaxy 4, back before Yan's clip, the full clip came to light. The scenes from the pilot, the home movies of Smugglers, Abominable Snowman, Delta and Banner bloopers, and then the Underworld raw studio footage. I mean, this is kind of a bumper volume. But I will say that on occasion, I would buy from people in the around if I felt like that I wanted to see, like Robert just said, I wanted to see if I got a better quality copy. And one of my examples is a place in Chicago that called themselves Brit TV, and they were selling they're selling everything, and they were giving me some cockamamie story about, yeah, we're kind of in league with the BBC, because I asked them, I'm like, are you guys legit? And they're like, oh yeah, we're working with the BBC because they want to release more of the our orphaned episodes, and they're working with us on it. And I knew it wasn't true, but I wanted to see. So for $20, I bought Reign of Terror, and it was clear that all copies of Reign of Terror came from their tape, because it's the same kind of episodes 1 through 3 were not great quality, but watchable. But episode 6 was really strong looking, but those are still better copies than what I had. So my guess is that everything came from those PAL tapes, because Chicago was a big hub, at least in our area, of where tapes were disseminated from in terms of collectors and stuff. And I know like some of you who are watching are from the East Coast, so I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying that at least in the Midwest, that seemed to be a very strong place where a lot of those like master tapes that ended up becoming our copies, maybe 15, maybe 3 gens down or whatever, originally came from.
Well, yeah, but also you quite often, your copy may have been 5 more tape generations down, and just getting literally a better copy just meant getting closer to the original source.
Exactly.
And of course, then I mean, where were these coming from? Because they had to come from some PAL source to start with. So these were all coming over from the UK from someone. And again, now we're getting into later, but I mean, there were definitely times where I upgraded and you could tell, okay, they're from the same PAL source. It's like the same PAL tape has been used to convert these because they all have the exact same flaws.
Yep.
And that, but yes, and I recall, about the time that I was getting into it, some of these orphaned episodes were starting to be released, because I remember first time I got Wheel in Space was actually a transfer from Cybermen in the early years, not from a camera copy. But
Yeah.
I did have a lot of camera copies, specifically, 10th Planet, and I remember, trying to do it's much easier. People nowadays think that this is something very easy to do, but replacing the audio on 10th Planet, because I had one episode that was a horrible camera copy that had like much better audio, much clearer, and yet I had this other videotape that had much better picture, but you couldn't make out anything that was being said. And trying to edit like that, which is very easy to do on a computer now, it was very difficult to do back in the day, unless you had the exact right equipment, and you have to time it perfectly too. So yes, it's got to be fun trying to do those type of projects.
But we loved doing that though, didn't we? I mean, that was kind of the fun part about it, is like, okay, it's not quite right. And I mean, Robert still carries this on to an incredible degree with stuff, but it's not quite right, but I can fix it. I can make it, I can make it better. And for me, the example was always like the Dalek early years. And it's like, why is the opening credits for Evil the Daleks not fully on there? I know why. I mean, it just wasn't on the film print, but it's like, why would you release it like that? So I went and I took a different source, and I did an on-the-fly edit of the opening of another Troughton episode, and figured out how many seconds I need to hit record by the time it kicks into record as Flying Eraserhead VCR. Apart from the fact there was a contrast difference between the color of the black and white, it was dead on. It's like, ooh, now I can watch this. I mean, I didn't really want to watch it until I had it incomplete. There's something, inherent with some of us that, an OCD of a certain level, that we have to see things a certain way. And Robert, to answer your question, it is widely believed, after talking to a number of people in the UK, that a lot of the PAL tapes of the black and white episodes actually came from the stuff that Ian Levine had bought in the 80s, because he bought the prints from the BBC. He made video transfers of all the episodes. I mean, I'm just saying it for everyone. Robert knows all this. And then from there, he made transfers onto video, and he did make copies for people. And I believe one of the people he gave copies to started to just let it out, and that's really why there's so much of that stuff started to really circulate around. And I'm not saying that's the only place that those came from, but it's an interesting point. Let me see if I can find it here. Simon had a note here that I thought was really interesting. Sorry, I'm covering you up, Robert. My uncle had a friend called Charles who he met through a snooker player, and Charles was very well off and had links into the BBC and managed to get a hold of all sorts in the late 80s and early 90s. And we've heard this story quite a bit, which was, I mean, that's the fun part about it, is like finding that Willy Wonka, in a sense, to see if we can get really nice stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you contrast that with like the most recent episode Recovery, which is now 7 years old. And it was like announced and out instantly. And I remember in the 80s and 90s, you would hear about a new episode being found, and then it's like, how do you get it out of the BBC and get it into fans' hands? And it would oftentimes take years before we'd see it start to circulate.
And the funny thing about that is, like, you'd start asking your contacts like the week after it, like the next day you hear about it, and you're just like, when are you getting Ice Warriors? Have you heard about getting Ice Warriors? Are you getting Ice Warriors? You know, and it just, you know, because I would get it from people who I would trade with, and I would just go to the people that I would get a lot of stuff from and ask them also. And that's where also, you know, you talk about, you know, Web and Enemy, but also Tomb of the Cybermen was a big one about that, because as soon as it was announced, there was a VHS release already planned. In my mind, it was like, well, I don't need to really bother about it because it's going to be here. It was announced, I think, in January of '92, something like that, and it was out in May of '92 in the UK, and that's one of my first UK pre-records that I bought, because like, I can't miss out on this. This is too important. This is like the one story I've been wanting to see recovered, and it's here. So, oh, this is a good one, and I would definitely agree. That's for another conversation, Tobias. Let's just be honest. I agree with you 100%, but that's for another conversation, and it's a good conversation to have.
So, no, and I remember specifically with Tomb of the Cybermen, which actually reminds me of like one of the other sources that I would get things from to check out, specifically the color Pertwee episodes that were all originally sourced from Larry Sherritt. This person would advertise in Comics Buyer's Guide, in the ads in there, his name was Stephen Russo, as I recall, and I mean, I remember getting a copy of the color Ambassadors of Death and some other things from him, and I remember, yes, because I wanted to get a copy of Tomb of the Cybermen as soon as it was available, and he was advertising, you know, he's like had it like less than a month after it came out, because I believe it was 6 to 8 months before it came out here.
Yes, it came out in October of '92 here.
Yeah, and so basically, yeah, I remember purchasing it from him right away, and I also remember that, you know, it was an actual PAL conversion, but for whatever reason he had killed the color, so which doesn't matter for the actual episodes, but the Morris Berry interview at the beginning was all in black and white too.
Did you think that was how they did it, or were you surprised when you actually saw it in color, or did you just kind of figure, because if you got the BBC logo, that had been black and white too, I guess. So yes, it would have, all of that was black and white. So I didn't know until I got the CBS Fox tape that the interview was supposed to be in color too, and then I gave away the tape that I had bought from Russo because I no longer needed it. I ended up with Tomb of the Cybermen. Like I said, I bought it and I sent it off to a friend in Buffalo, which that's an interesting story too. I mean, the whole thing about where you get you just remember certain episodes that you get, because from him, I got like the first really good quality Planet of the Daleks episode 3 in black and white. But from him, he did the conversion. He sent it back to me, and I was smart enough because, first of all, that cover, the PAL tape cover for Tomb of the Cybermen, had the foil lettering for Tomb of the Cybermen. It was such a striking cover by Alistair Pearson. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to risk not getting this back, because I never thought that I'd get any more PAL VHS tapes. So jump forward, 20 some years, and it's like, wow, okay, I was wrong about that. But the guy sent it back. He didn't send back the PAL original, so it's like, yep, I knew it. Wasn't a big deal. I didn't have PAL equipment at that point. But Tomb of the Cybermen is sitting in my hands to watch, and I go to the VCR to put it in, and it's there, but it's rolling. It's rolling. It's rolling. You can't stop it. And this is when we could have the fiddle with the knobs and stuff to get it both on the VCR and the TV, and it wouldn't stop rolling. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been waiting so long for this, and this, asshole tape is just rolling and rolling and rolling. And finally, I had to hook up. Because I was just like, I'll try anything. I hooked up a 13-inch black and white portable TV, and I just plugged it in, and so I had to watch it on this little thing, and it actually didn't roll. But it was like, all right, but Oh my gosh, how amazing to get that. And Stephen, Simon, are you asking if Stephen had a catalog? Because yes, he did. Because Robert's not alone with
He
it.
asked about John Fenton that Tobias mentioned.
What's that?
I think he's asking about John Fenton that Tobias mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, and also there was John McElroy too that had was selling. Not that we're trying to out people, but I mean it is what it is. And I bought the TV movie work print from him. I was like, where did he get this from? And it's like he sent a note to just a few people. I'm sure he sent it to everybody, but I felt special because I had bought so much from him that I shouldn't have, but I didn't care. And it's like, I'm offering this rough cut, and it's like, yes, please send it immediately. So, I mean, and this was in April of '96. So I saw the rough cut before I actually saw the finished TV movie.
And now we all know where that leaked from too, but yeah, no. And I mean, now we're getting later into this, and of course now by the mid 90s, I think each of us were starting to get online and get our own contacts overseas. And that was when then it turned into more than just Doctor Who. Now I had friends that could send me again, and then I had another friend here in the US that had PAL equipment to do the conversion. So if I got PAL tapes in a trade, I would have to send them to him. So, and he was kind enough to send me back my original tapes, but he would always make his own copy to keep for himself. And then at some point, deciding to get my own PAL equipment to be able to play the tapes and make my own copies and stuff. So
because it wouldn't just be like the video recorder you would need; you'd also need a television that could handle the signal. Am I right, Robert?
Yes.
Not necessarily. Like this is the converter. I mean, you could watch it converted from PAL through here to the TV. It'd be converted. But then, of course, you didn't stop at just that. You ended up getting the TV also.
That was because, yes, this friend of mine, as you know, came to visit and brought his PAL equipment and was extolling the virtues of PAL television and why everyone needed to have a PAL TV. And I just recall him playing some of the Pertwee episodes and those opening credits, and I was like, wait a minute, there's other shades in these opening credits than just red. And so it convinced me, yes, that I needed to be able to do to watch it in PAL, and also to get a better converter to be able to control my own conversions.
Yes.
So I didn't have to trust other people to convert it however they might. So, yeah.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Going back in time just a little bit, one of the things too is like it wasn't always about getting those orphan episodes or anything like that, because Mike, you ended up getting the entire run of Doctor Who episodically from somebody in Pittsburgh who recorded from Pittsburgh at WQEX.
Yeah, because originally where I was growing up in Iowa, actually was the Nebraska station that started it, but they were showing it in episodic format, which, as I understand, was actually more rare, and it was much more common for it to be marketed in the edited movie version, where all the episodes were stitched together. So it was a little bit of a shock for me when I first started tape trading to see, oh my gosh, these things are edited together. So I was always on a quest to try to get everything episodically if I could. And so, yeah, I was lucky enough to connect with a friend in Pittsburgh who was able to get all those off-air ones sent over, and then started trying to convert you and put you in a headlock and tell you how awesome cliffhangers were.
No, I mean, I certainly knew it, but the thing was, is like you, it was like, oh, this is over here. We're just showing it in, some people want to call it omnibus, but I'm going to be honest. You call it that. I know it's called that in the UK, but the thing is, on the slates from Lionheart, they were called movie version. They actually, I have them. they were called movie version, and that's in the US, that's the vernacular we use for it, because it literally is. I mean, that's a very much a UK thing, but here they were called movie versions. And it was really tough to get those episodics. And so I knew early on, watching Hartnell and Trout in movie versions was really tough for me especially when I first watched them. When I started to see them episodically, and I know. But when I started seeing like just the orphan episodes, their episodic, the cliffhangers, like I wanted to get it. Wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the characters that we've run into, because this leads into this, is that there was somebody in the Twin Cities who would get in a lot of stuff that you knew, Pete knew, and he liked the feel of cash. Let's put it that way. He was a fan of the green pieces of paper. Mm-hmm. And I remember that when I was starting to get into all this, that I was, talking with him, because I might have purchased a couple things from him, because he was the only game in town that had converted episodes. Everyone else had, I mean, I didn't know you that well, Mike, but everyone else had camera copies. So it's like, I wanted a converted version of, like, say, The Invasion or something like that. You had to kind of, grease the palms a little bit for that. Rightly or wrongly, as a collector, sometimes you want to do that sort of stuff. But I was saying to him, I wanted to get the entire run of Doctor Who episodically, and he was just saying that I can help you with that. I know a guy named Mike who lives up in Brainerd, but why don't you just go through me? I know him. He only charges like $12 a tape, and knowing you and actually talking with Pete about it. Pete's like, no, I know Mike. Here, let me ask him if it's okay to give you his number. And then, we called and we talked for a long time. I mean, we almost, had a friendship from the start. But, your thing was always, getting stuff from you. You never charge for anything. Yeah. It's always
the charging rate for Mike was 0.
Right.
So this person was definitely greasing his own palms there.
It was. He was playing the middleman. He was marking up 100%. And it was very very annoying once you really realize it, and you probably had to feel like, come on, really,
Yeah. After that, I was done with them. I'm like, no, because I'm very much like in the vein of you and Robert both. Like, if someone takes the time to share with you, you share back with other people too. We love the program, so of course we're going to trade tapes, and you might be compensated for the cost of a tape if you bought it on behalf of that person, but not charging for the content that's on that, because it's not for you to charge.
Okay, well, let me ask you both this, because you bring up a good point, and I would agree with you completely, but I'm going to also, play devil's advocate here. And Robert, you and I have talked about this in the past too. Are you always sharing when someone asks?
Yeah. Yeah. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the fact that sometimes, you're just wanting to be able to let everyone see, something. You're doing an event or something. You have like, something that everyone else hasn't had a chance to see. Like, say, 71 edit of Remembrance of the Daleks or something like that, and right away you're being surrounded by everyone who just wants to have a copy of it. You can't give everybody a copy of it. You are bound in some ways by the people who you got it from, saying that, please don't pass this along. You're
jumping years in the future for me, because it wasn't until the late 90s now where then I had made, like I said, my contacts in the UK, and there were very few things, but there were a few things that I was asked not to share. Mm-hmm. But that's much down the future from the time period you're talking about right now. Anything that I had in the mid 90s and that I just completely shared on.
So the ultra rare stuff, that I think that could be, I think that's a different realm there.
Yeah, you're getting into the period of recons and other things when I would start to get certain things and be asked like, okay, but please don't share this. And I always took that as don't make a copy for somebody, but if you show it to people, you're at a convention and you show it to people, that's the only way you can share that is if you've been asked not to make a copy for anyone, and you don't want to upset people that have been kind enough to give you things too. But again, now we're moving way down the road on that. So,
So, that's an interesting question, Simon. I would say, like, my complete set of Marco Polo, I consider that still to be fairly rare.
How did you hack into iTunes to get that anyway? I'm still curious how you managed that.
you just gotta have, all you have to do is have a membership to iTunes. That's the funny thing. And I know, like, Robert hates Macs. So, that's why
I have a membership to iTunes on one day, long enough to rip, what was it, like 11 episodes, and then I was done with it, canceled my account, wiped the computer so that Apple couldn't find me anywhere, and yeah.
Well, and that's going to be, I think that'll need to be a conversation at some point, because just that whole celebration of those fines, it's very interesting what everyone did to kind of, enjoy that night. But, I think, like, I think ultra rare, to answer Simon's question, is a very relative term, because I don't think there's really anything ultra rare anymore for Doctor Who, for example, because so much is out there on the Blu-rays and on the DVDs. But, if I recall, just from back in the day, it's just even talking about, like, a really nice transfer of an episode, a black and white episode that hasn't, like, Underwater Menace episode 2 or 3, excuse me, something like that, where it was, there's just not been great copies around, but this was nicer, and the person who got it, from someone else that they trusted, and it just kind of stayed in the circle. That, it's just honoring, like you said, Robert, just honoring that person's request.
Yeah, but those kind of things, I never had anyone ask me to keep, and the remembrance thing. I didn't have a problem making copies of that for people and other things.
Your memory fails you, my friend. It really does. So
maybe, but
it failed you on both accounts. Both times, this is what you had said, and remembrance in particular was one that you had asked not to do that.
Okay.
I have a really good memory.
I am much older now, and my memory is starting to fail me. But the only thing that I really recall that was the Galaxy 4 clip. But by the time that I got it, it had leaked out because you got a copy, Mike, right? From some completely different source, or who was it? There's someone else here in the Twin Cities that had a copy. Right.
It was who we were talking about early, Mike. He wanted a copy. He didn't have the copy. He wanted the copy, but there was something weird that happened in that situation. But it was, Mike, is who we were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah,
who had talked? Yeah,
and it's kind of funny because, and it's not a big part of the conversation, but, like, I recall there would be moments when you're talking to a contact on the phone, and all of a sudden you realize that you're talking about something totally different than the other person is. I remember being confronted once that I had promised somebody, Makra Terror, all 4 episodes, like all 4 episodes. And I'm like, no, I never said I had that. Where did you get the idea that I had that? It was funny because I was going back through some old stuff today, and I could see on my calendar, which kind of was like a sort of diary at the time, that I was writing down all these rumors of things that I had been hearing about, and there was Makra Terror, and there was, like, episodes of Dalek Master Plan. And it's funny, you have conversations and you think you're, at the time I remember saying that I had heard that they existed, and this person thought that I said that I had them. And I remember it actually boiled over because he thought the whole time that I was holding out on him. And I was like, no, I just thought that they were existing and maybe someone would get them to me, but I don't have them.
So were we in a kind of a very interesting time where people actually thought that other collectors had missing material?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You'd hear rumors in pre-internet days,
Yes.
Of things that existed, like Invasion of Dinosaurs episode 1 in color, and there were always rumors floating around about that there were copies that existed, and you just had to find the right contact, the right person that could get
I remember hearing those type of rumors too, but I never believed them, not with anybody that I was tape trading with or anything. I didn't think that any of them had anything other than what was available, and I, knew that there wasn't a color, that couldn't be hidden from other like people knowing, and that a color invasion of the dinosaurs. So I don't know if you want to talk about that now, Greg, or if you have other things.
Well, it is an interesting point, because I remember there's somebody in the Twin Cities who is different from the other person. I'm trying to save names a little bit in some of these situations, but it's different than the other person.
Say, like,
Person.
just give them a name, and then they made a made-up name. So
sure, Dave. It's not made up, but he believed he had a color version. He said it's many generations down, but you could see the color signal there. But he wouldn't share it with anybody because it was, I have this color version, and there was was it on the disused Yeti what? A disused Yeti website about kind of debunking. I thought that there was a website that you had done, Robert, with other people that debunked some of these things, and Invasion 1 was one of them. And even I remember pointing out to this guy, hey, you should check this out. I don't think you have a color copy. He's like, nope, I know I do. It's really interesting, the stubbornness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, the website is still up. The Disused Yeti was just the name of the newsletter that Bruce and I did. But this was it moved locations because it was always on my trading page for the reconstructions.
Yeah.
And now I believe it's university.co.uk or com/archive or something. And the article is still there, written by an old friend of mine, Dominic Jackson. And yes, there's lots of screen captures and basically answering some of these questions about, like, hey, is there a color copy out there? And it's just a mere matter of and nowadays there's even more possibly to this story, but the more you copy a generation down of a black and white source,
An analog.
Yes, on analog, it's you're introducing just artifacts, and the picture quality is going worse, and then any artifacts get replicated and made even worse in the next copy, and so on and so forth. And you would get this like color haze over some of the episodes, so it looked like there was color. But also there's now, and I don't know if this is the case, but could very well be, the stories of how originally Peter Crocker decided to investigate VidFire, and that because he saw he had videotaped some black and white episodes off of
UK Gold, wasn't it?
UK Gold. Well, I'm talking about VidFire. I'm talking about the
Chroma Dots.
I'm talking about the Chroma Dots, and it's the Chroma Dots, and basically, when you would fast forward, you would get color interference on the screen. And then they investigated, and it's like, oh, these Chroma Dots are baked into the episodes on certain film prints. And later they found a way to turn those Chroma Dots back into color. And if these Chroma Dots were baked into that, episode 1 of Invasion, part 1, it's then maybe that's what was introducing those color artifacts as it was being copied down more and more and more. But there was never any actual color there. It was just a byproduct of having a 25th generation copy of a black and white episode, because you can find that on if you have Quatermass in the pit. It's like if you copy that down 25 times too. It was never in color, but you get the exact same color artifacting on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to be clear, folks, I do not have Marco Polo. let's just nip that in the bud right now. I do not have Marco Polo.
You need to change the filter on your screen when you're being sarcastic. Maybe some red lights start flashing.
Well, it doesn't help that my homemade DVD covers of Marco Polo with the actual episodes are behind me on here, but I'll just move my head so you can't see it. Actually, my Doctor Who collection is over here, full of like Blu-ray sets that I haven't opened yet and stuff. So,
well, and you know, I've been thinking about this lately too. I wonder if our trading years have kind of informed our purchasing decisions. Like you think about how we went from trading tapes to purchasing the VHS, to purchasing the DVD, and now the Blu-ray sets. And it's always like this quest to find the best copy available, right? The best quality. And I've always kind of wondered if that's just was kind of burnt in to our psyche from those years of like, oh man, you know, they've got, you know, this marginally better product and I need to buy it.
Yes. Absolutely. And, you know, the thing is I ended up, this might be a conversation for another time, but I ended up buying all the PAL VHS tapes, barring one title, and because it just wasn't available. And I was always greatly disappointed in the quality of the PAL tapes, the pre-record tapes, because they used really poor stock, and it just never looked good. But then again, you know, it's also about presentation, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing that I've always really loved about my collection was that, you know, it's not just about, you know, the tapes, but like, you know, how do you label them? You know, how do you stop the camera from wobbling, and how do you label them so that they look like how you want it to be? And that's the thing about the PAL tapes was that it was in nice plastic cases. They felt like these were the final time I ever needed to buy these.
I think your memory fails a little too, Greg, because it wasn't necessarily all of them. Because I can just say Pyramids of Mars. When I sent you a copy of Pyramids of Mars from the PAL tape, and you were like, "How is this? It's like better than VHS quality." And yeah,
so well, your memory failed you because that was me that sent it to you.
Yeah.
Fight.
Right. How can anyone believe any of us? But you are absolutely right. That was like the one. I mean, the earlier ones were much better. And I'm going through the process. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I keep posting the PAL covers, and that's because I'm putting them. I'm doing them digitally. I'm backing them up because there's also that OCD in me that I have these beautifully restored episodes, and I will always watch them, but I do want to still have the versions that were unrestored. You know, I still want to keep a copy of them somewhere. And I had a conversation with somebody that Robert and I have traded with before just recently, and I asked him because he provided us with really nice quality of the domestic color Pertwees. And I asked him, now that we have like, digital, ways of getting the stuff onto the digital format, do you still have those that I could possibly get, just even if it's like you said, like this much better, I'd like it. And he's like, well, I didn't keep it because, we got these other versions on Blu-ray and DVD now. And me just like went into cardiac arrest because to me, this is like, I get not everyone can do this, but I want to have like 100 different copies of it if it really are milestone moments for how the program looked. So, Yeah,
no, I'm with you on that, Greg. I'm one of those ones where I've kept the official VHS releases. I've kept the DVDs. I'm planning on keeping them, even as I replace them with the Blu-ray sets. But I did not keep the off-air stuff. I only have a handful of off-air tapes. And just for nostalgia, just for sentimental reasons, I wish I had kept more of that. Just because earlier this summer, I popped one of those very few tapes in and was watching something that I had recorded almost 40 years ago, maybe 35, 36 years ago. And it was cool to see it. It looked like crap. It was the Leisure Hive, and it looked god awful. And it was, poor reception, and it's VHS, and it was recorded on the lowest speed possible or the lowest quality possible to fit as many episodes on. But it's still just neat to kind of have that link to the past, to that thing that you did once.
And I want to kind of a couple things that came to mind when you said that. I was going to bring up, because a couple of you out watching had brought up the Ice Warriors in particular. And I put up Tobias's that he bought it got it from some guy in Minnesota, but also somebody else noted that they got it and it had the burnt in time codes on, and this one was really, I remember this one being very nasty because it wasn't just the burnt in time code on the bottom. There was one on the right, one on the left, and then something on the bottom. And my first copy of the Ice Warriors was a camera copy where they zoomed in, so they cropped out all that time code, and you could still see that a little bit was there, but they wanted to make it so it was a clean screen, so everybody was zoomed in, and it was really nasty to watch. Actually, I think it actually made it so I didn't actually ever really like the story, to be honest.
Well, if I remember right, too, wasn't it like a really dark copy? Like it was difficult to see even when it was converted at that time.
It was a very dark copy too. It was, and that's what we were all excited. I think one of the greatest. And actually, Tobias must have had the same one that we did, because he's just like, yeah, they cropped it all out. Sorry, Simon, I didn't see that. Yeah, or Tobias, we didn't see that. And with that too, that's why I think one of my favorite VHS releases, I know we're not talking about them, was that Ice Warrior set, because it'd be the first time to see this in relatively decent quality.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I know, because I had gotten much better quality again with the reconstruction when we did that. Those were really good quality at the time, probably the best quality I had seen for any of those orphaned episodes other than Underwater Menace 2 at the time, and or 2, 3. And but they were something to do with the transfer. They all had a horrible green tint to them. I don't remember. I have no idea why, but the entire screen was just on all 4 of the existing episodes were all tinted green, a very heavy dark green, which I was able to cut out when I was converting it to NTSC. But the PAL original that I had, was very poor. But obviously they weren't cleaned up like they were for the VHS release. But that was one of the ones that I remember, like, wow, this is the best quality I've ever seen this in when I got the reconstruction original.
I don't know if I ever had a copy of it without the burnt in time code until I got the reconstruction from you, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm even struggling to remember if I got the reconstruction from you. I might have had a burnt in time code version maybe up until the release, for all I know.
A lot of times with the reconstructions, the people that were involved with that had access to much better quality copies and hadn't done a lot of tape trading. One of the people that was involved was a very close friend of John Nathan Turner, and had probably gotten copies from him at some point, but had never really been involved because he didn't have to trade to get anything, he didn't have to trade tapes to get anything. And he was able to he just had these. And so when they did the reconstructions, he, would put the copies of the episodes that he had onto those tapes. And that was what got distributed around. So
yeah, very much
better quality than what had been out there previously.
Richard writes in, I traded a 71 edit for Vengeance on Varos for the Ice Warriors. I always enjoyed collecting the 71 edits of episodes. Yes, very much so. I very much loved getting the 71 edits.
I have to embarrass myself by admitting, I remember getting a 71 edit, I believe, of Kinda, and watching it and not hearing any music, not hearing any sound effects, and kind of going, and just not fully comprehending the context of what I was watching, and just kind of like tossing the tape to the side and thinking, oh, this is kind of dull. Like there were moments in my tape trading where, like, I remember getting a copy of Quatermass in the Pit in the late 80s. And it was an enjoyable program, but I didn't get the context of it and truly understand like how rare it would be to actually have a copy of that to distribute around to other people as well. Well,
similar, we just from broadcast, I don't think any of us, we all had these on our collections. And, with I don't think any of us realized that the music and was missing from the Random Morbius Part 1.
Yeah.
But for the second half of Resurrection of the Daleks, it was very, very obvious because all of a sudden the music just stopped and all you could hear was studio sound. And
Yeah.
there was no effects sound either. And none of us liked it. We hated it. We were trying to find copies that had it. And then came to find out later, we wish we would have kept those because it was ultra rare
Yeah.
to have that if there's no music or sound. It's just studio sound on them, and hadn't kept them. But yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, regarding, you talk about Quatermass in the Pit, and I remember in the early 90s being so frustrated because I couldn't find any of the Quatermass stuff through anybody. That was something that I saw somebody had a website detailing these, and Quatermass in the Pit was something I had wanted to see for so long. And finally, I think it was probably 1996, 1997, somebody got a copy from over here in the US. They released, and I don't think it was official, but a two set tape of Quatermass in the Pit omnibus, 2 parts, one part each tape. And I got a copy of that. And that's one of the true moments of television that blew my mind, watching that for the first time, because I had wanted to see it so badly, and it did not disappoint at all. And I know for Robert, for you, if you don't mind me putting words in your mouth, I know that like getting like Quatermass 2 was kind of an exciting, thing for you to get.
I saw Quatermass 2 before I saw Quatermass in the Pit. The person who sent both to me sent me Quatermass 2 first, because they, these again were people in the UK, and they thought, well, Quatermass 2 is much more rare, so that's what they had sent to me first. Of course, none of this made any difference to me because I had no Quatermass and I didn't conceive of it. Again, now we're getting into other British shows. Yeah. And talking to, having these contacts in the UK that have been doing their own tape trading for other series other than just Doctor Who. And again, doing the same thing where they were trying to upgrade to get better and better quality copies. And yes, I was sent Quatermass 2, and yeah, I was flabbergasted by that. And then later, Quatermass in the Pit. But I think that's always kind of affected me, seeing Quatermass 2 first. It's still, in many ways, it's kind of more nostalgic to me than Quatermass in the Pit.
Right. And I know that. And I also remember I never had seen Steptoe and Son until you had sent me some doc. It might have even been like a 2-part, like Edge of Destruction or something like that, because you're always looking for better quality Hartnells that had everything intact. And on the end of it was My Old Man Zatori. And it just always felt very interesting to me that some of these things that we started with for other British television always kind of started with the most rare stuff, because that was the stuff, like you said, your friends were trading. That was the stuff that was really, so the stuff that was like what everyone else would see was actually harder for me to get. I didn't get a full set of Steptoe and Son until much later. But it was My Old Man Zatori, which was really got me into like really wanting to see more Steptoe and Son, which I found is backwards, but it's also really interesting too.
Mm-hmm. No, and that was kind of the thing with getting in touch with those UK contacts eventually. And I think you might have had similar experiences that, they had already done the same thing we had done, where they were been trading with other, traders within the UK and upgrading their copies all along the way, to the point where when we started to contact them in the late 90s, they already had much better quality copies of some of these things and were sharing them with us.
Yeah, very, very much so. It was always interesting how the stuff you'd find, and it was always nice because there's so much stuff that I didn't really realize about until they would send it to us. I mean, that's what informed my love for some of the stuff, and we'd end up getting stuff like 1984 that I've only read about and never had seen, or like you had gotten, I think Robert, you got all like Nigel Neal's Beasts and the Stone tape and stuff like that we've only read about. Ace of Wands was another one that it's like, oh, that's nice, but nobody in our circle really collected that, but you're able to bring, you had friends who would send it to you, and then we'd watch it and be like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
Yep. Now we need to see more. So yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's exactly. It started a thirst that went from, getting all Doctor Who stuff. But then when, at least speaking for myself, when I got a respectable collection together, then it was like, now what? What?
I will say, Greg, I think that also at the same time, you and I and Mike also, we were all still growing our taste and appetite for British television away from the tape trading, just by watching stuff on PBS, and coming into where we were, watching Are You Being Served and Allo Allo and Red Dwarf, and some of us, might have watched Blake Seven, but not all of us.
And only people with taste watch Blake Seven, Robert.
They. So we were growing our taste in British television, and then when we saw the archive television stuff too, as you say, Greg, like seeing Steptoe and Son and some other things, it was kind of then it's like, just opened our minds even further. As like, okay, we already like, as they would term them on PBS, Britcoms. We want to see more. I want to see, all of these other shows that, and again, friends would send other things, not just that, but newer shows that, Goodnight Sweetheart and some other things that weren't on PBS over here at the time. Just a shame.
I think like contemporaneously for me in the late 80s, early 90s, that's what Red Dwarf was. That was contemporary TV at the time, and it was only because of the Doctor Who trading that I was able to acquire those and pick up on those. So yeah, it's funny how one ripples and leads to another.
Well, and who would have thought too that Allo Allo would be something of fodder for tape trading, because over here they stopped for a while. They didn't go past series 5. Mm-hmm. They didn't syndicate that. And for whatever reason, especially Series 6 was not included for a number of years afterwards. And then suddenly, and we all thought it was because Gordon Kaye had his accident and that they just didn't make anymore. And then one day, you through Pete, he had told me that you got the not the 7th, not the 6th series, not the 7th series, not the 8th series, but the 9th series of Allo Allo. And it was suddenly like, there's been 4 other series of Allo Allo that we never knew about. It's like we just didn't even know that it existed. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh wow, now that becomes something very interesting, because there's going to be a ton of people who wants to see that, even though it's like we're skipping a lot. And there's actually quite a difference between series 8 and 9 in terms of, for a lot of reasons. But to your point also, Red Dwarf really was a very modern show for tape trading, because they were making new series, but they weren't coming over to us, at least in a timely manner. And I know that a lot of you had an insatiable appetite for these new episodes. And this is interesting. I worked on most of the programs you're talking about. Well, I love those programs. So I'm not sure what you did on them, but thank you all the same, because it's actually woven my life in a lot of ways. It tells me it got me a lot of my friends. It got me to how being able to speak passionately about it. So it's very interesting. I don't mean to dominate, but there's something that came through I did want to talk about. So forgive me. Almost everything you mentioned is BBC, any ITV tape trading. And I want to bring up, Robert, you remember when Curse of Fatal Death originally aired on BBC for Comic Relief, and we had this elaborate scheme in place that whoever taped it in the UK, and I forget if it was Dominic or because I now remember, and we had the scheme where he would overnight me the tapes because I had a converter ready to go. I would make copies. I'd go through and edit down. So because there was the 4 parts were had a lot of stuff in between, would edit it to one, and then I would send it out to a number of people that we agreed on that needed to have this right away. But the first set of tapes that Dominic sent me were really rare episodes of the ABC series Public Eye, which I had no idea at the time what that was. In fact, probably for the first 3 or the 3 years after that, I kept calling it Private Eye because I just didn't even know what the hell it was. And Dominic was kind of like, can we get that back, please? I need that back. Please don't share that. I need it back. I need it back. And they were really nice quality. They were clearly from the master tapes. They had the VT countdown clocks. They had everything that was really nice. But it was that sort of like that moment of having something really ultra rare, but I had absolutely no idea really what it was. And to be honest, a little bit didn't really care because I wanted my Curse of Fatal Death, you know. And it cost me a lot of money to get that overnighted again. So, yeah.
Well, it just speaks to like what a different world it was, tape trading. I know I sound like an old fart saying it, but you know, pre-internet, it was really through word of mouth. It was just through the people you knew and the conversations you'd have over the phone, and almost like the telephone game where it kind of distorts as it makes its way through fandom. But yeah, so so I appreciated and understood the context of these programs so much better once I was able to like actually read about them and see more about them. And that, you know, for me, that's really when the purchases started kicking in of just trying to gather up and collect more archived British television.
And I think it also helped that when they became available on DVD and whatnot, that is like, okay, I can take a punt on it. You know, I can give it a chance. And you, like you said, you were on forums where you could see people really, really talk through it. I'll be honest, most of the stuff I get now that is more of a rare side to it is actually ITV stuff. There isn't a lot of BBC stuff I get anymore. It's mostly ITV regional stuff from different programs. But even that, like with network, so much of that stuff has been released now. It's academic in a lot of ways. But something like Public Eye, it's like you watched it back. I watched it back in the 1999 when I got those tapes. I'm like, whatever. Now I'm glued to it, and it's also because I've matured, and my sense. Whether or not everyone wants to like Public Eye doesn't matter, but it matured for me to appreciate it a lot more and really appreciate everything about that series. So. And another one too that we got, and we won't mention names of who gave it, but I mean, like those episodes that were found of the Avengers, those came our way relatively, quickly after they were discovered. But by that point, it's not tapes anymore. It's a different beast now at that point.
Now you're talking, things that are much more recent, and I remember, Greg, yes, when you said, "Hey, you want to watch Tunnel of Fear?" And yeah, sure. And sitting down, and afterwards, I remember telling you that was the most boring episode of TV I've probably ever watched. We were excited because it's like, oh wow, we're seeing a episode that's been missing for a long time, and I was like, oh, okay.
It is. I know a lot of people really liked that episode. I personally I'm not. I much rather see like the Frighteners. Girl in the Trapeze is a favorite of mine. I wish Steed was in it, but oh well. It'd been nice to see more of Hot Snow. But the other one, Tunnel of Fear, is just not the same. Let me just go here. When BBC recovered, we had the rumor that episode 3 of Doctor Moonbase. Yeah, well, and the whole thing about Moonbase 3 is interesting in itself because it was found in the U.S. It was found to be aired on Sci-Fi Channel, which it's like BBC actually didn't really know about it until about the time it started to air, and so like the only copies that exist are NTSC, copies of the series, but it's great that they're there. That's an acquired taste, but I think. Let me ask you guys. I'm sure by the time we got done with VHS, we were all SP. But did we start off SLP, EP?
Well, it's it's funny, and I don't know if most of these people commenting are US, UK or not. And obviously, I think we came to realize later because of the frame rate difference in the UK that, you know, what was only a 2-hour tape here was a 3-hour tape there, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a big enough difference that, yeah, if a tape had been 3 hours, I could have fit a lot more on it. I probably would have taped more things in SP. But yeah, when I started recording Doctor Who in 1984, it was the tapes, you know, because I'm not going to buy cheap tapes. They were Scotch, and it was, I think, $11 I had to save up to buy those because I was still in high school. And but basically, yeah, everything was EP. I had planned out all of my, okay, I know what exists and what's in the PBS packages. I planned out what's going to fit on each tape and just start recording. And yeah, everything was EP. It wasn't until much later, and this is when, again, by this point, I had a lot of people asking to borrow my tapes, and some would go missing and other things. I don't think any of my Doctor Who, but other things. So
just like the BBC,
share tapes. So yeah, by the early, I think 1990, I think I decided, okay, I'm going to switch over to SVHS, and then because nobody else is going to have Super VHS, nobody can borrow my tapes anymore, and then I started converting all my Doctor Who's to SP on Super VHS. And plan to have like one story per tape, to the point where I was going, because I had to, again, now SVHS tapes were rare to find too, and I would have to go and make a special purchase to get the T160s to be able to fit the 6-parters on.
It's amazing how we have these like rituals in a sense, because when I decided to go to SP, first of all, I was taping everything at the EP. This is my first tape of all my camera copies on it, and there's like 300 episodes on here because I just like, well, why not? I didn't realize it'd be such a quality difference, but I remember my friend Roger, the first tape I got was SP. He gave me before it aired in the US, Remembrance of the Daleks, and it was on his SP, and I thought to myself, what a waste. You only have one story on here. What are you thinking? This is a waste of a tape now, and I'll never do that. And, I've done it like 3 times over for the whole entire run of Doctor Who, but we have this, I remember at least in my area, we all were like Scotch tape people for the most part. We always liked Scotch tape. And I also worked out for Doctor Who how I want to do it, but I never trusted a T160. So I would either split them up, but something like the 2 Doctors, which was, part 1, 2, 3 are 45-minute episodes. I wrote to 3M, and I'm like, first of all, do you sell like T30s and do you sell T60s? Because for my T30, I wanted to put the pilot episode on. And then for the T60s, I wanted to do, I think one was, the 2 Doctors part 1, and then I forget what else I wanted to use for another couple T60s. And I mean, that was the minutia of how granular I got with how I wanted my tapes to look and everything. It's kind of a scary obsession looking back on it, but I don't think I've changed, unfortunately, at all.
That was also the start of a long list of restraining orders, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well,
alone.
Yeah, 3M's like, we don't want to talk to you anymore. And they sold them to me. But they actually called my mom because I put my phone number in, and they called my mom because I would clearly wrote like a child, and they're like, did you know your son wrote us? And she's like, yeah, I know, and we if you can sell us some, that'd be great. I remember, Mike, when I went to PolarisCon, which was after Time Festival, it was 1989. That's when I first, I had talked to you for nearly a year at that point, not quite a year, and you had kindly agreed that starting in my world of episodic Doctor Who, that you would copy for me all of season 1 of Hartnell. And so my mom was kind enough to buy me a 10-pack of Scotch tapes, And I remember the smell of the tapes when you unwrapped them, and just this. I mean, and it just was so heartwarming that it was like, this is going to be the future home of the Daleks, episodes 1 through 4, you know. And I would type up the labels. I'd put them through a typewriter. I'd type up the labels, give them to you. And so you came down from St. Cloud or Bismarck, excuse me, or no, sorry, Brainerd. You came down. You're up there. Who cares? You know, you're up north. And I made you take all these tapes back with you. And it wasn't even like one story per tape. Like the Daleks and Keys of Marinus and Sensorites all had to be split up per my special requests of, you know, only having 3 to 4 episodes on a tape. So this, you poor man, having to deal with this. And I don't know how many obscenities you probably threw my way when just like, oh my God, now I have to go on to episode 4 of Sensorites on its own tape. Screw you, Greg, you know, all that stuff.
Why am I not charging $12 per tape?
Yeah, like I could have made a fortune off this loser.
Yeah, the biggest obstacle was just you couldn't walk away from the VCR and just let it run through the whole tape. You'd have to like be there to actually sit through the Sensorites, which is really the part you need to apologize to me for, is making me sit through the Sensorites and hitting the stop button at the right point for you.
Oh, you got a big fan of Sensorites here, though. So
sorry, Robert. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, you know, they're asking if any reused any tapes. I did reuse tapes, but never Doctor Who tapes.
Mm-hmm.
My Doctor Who's all, you know, I kept those. I didn't do anything with, didn't tape over any of those, but other tapes, yeah, I would reuse from time to time.
Yeah, Doctor Who tapes, I never reused them either, which made life expensive, but it was, you know, I mean, and Simon, who has worked at the BBC, you know, it's interesting his take on all of that. And someday you should have him on to talk about his original work, colorizing Pertwees in the same vein of what ended up happening for, you know, the restoration team. But that being said, I looked at every time I made a tape of Doctor Who or got one in from someone that this was like my master. This was going to be like the final time that that I would ever need this again. That this was my best recording I was ever gonna get. So it's like it became sacrosanct for me to just put it on the thing. And it was like this own little ceremony. You know, it's kind of silly, but it was. I really put a lot of effort and work into it.
Well, and having a typewriter, man, that's fancy. I remember trying to hand draw the logo and try to create some sort of stylized format for my labels, which again, I wish I'd kept because it would just be funny to go back and look at all that.
And I remember because you were kind enough towards the end, I think I say you were kind enough, you were just sick of me sending the tapes, that you actually would send me your tapes so I could just copy them because you know, it's like, yeah, you know, I think for Silver Nemesis, I'd like 1 episode on each tape if I may, you know, and you're just like, I hate you. Just take the tapes. Maybe you'll be out of my life sometime soon if you just record everything.
But you're the one who drug me though over to the high quality, like, because for the longest time I held out and I was just cram as many episodes onto a tape as possible, EP all the way. And I remember finally going, okay, yeah, Greg's got a good point here. Why am I not doing a story per tape? And so I remember borrowing back a lot of your copies and then making copies for myself at higher quality finally.
There was a point that, first of all, we were lucky because KTCA finally showed, after many years, Tom Baker from season 12 to most of season 17 in episodic format. So that was like nice off-air copies of that. But then I found a friend in San Francisco, San Diego, something like that, Phil, and he was taping, it was KTEH, if I'm not mistaken, was recording Pertwees episodically. So he was sending me Pertwees episodic off air, not a gen down, but off air. And this was like, to me, that was like one of the greatest things because those seemed to be very hard to get. And at the time, that station ran Planet of the Daleks, episode 3 in black and white, and Invasion of the Dinosaurs 1, obviously in black and white. And that was just, once again, it was like I'm getting these off air, you know, and what we had before was so bad. This was a revelation for me.
Yeah. It's the quest for the best version you can get out there. And
I thought some of those were better quality than the pre-records, especially the UK ones. Ben, I'm curious by your question though. What children's TV program from the UK have you found? I haven't. I've not found. Well, I found a couple things actually, but not a children's program. I found a bit of a game show, a missing British television game show in Wisconsin, of all places, that was important, that I returned to Kaleidoscope. And I also found a recording of Charlton Hobbs' Sherlock Holmes on audio that I returned to Kaleidoscope, that no one could identify for sure if it was missing or not missing. At the very least, that version might have been, but it might have been a recording of something earlier, just with new opening and closing credits. So it's, yeah, but I've never, I don't know. I certainly haven't found any shows from UK, unless somebody has said something in the comments that I'm totally missing the thread. So if that's the case, I apologize.
Well, and then I don't know how you want to lead the conversation on, Greg, but you brought up some points, and it keeps coming back to me about this. As you said, Mike, trying to get the best quality copies, and that's the thing. At some point in the late '90s, I realized, I have amassed some of what I consider to be the best quality copies of a lot of these Doctor Who episodes.
Sure have.
And at this point, nobody's really trading with me. And then that was when the crystal clear audios came out, which led into me finding about the reconstructions and setting up, the distribution in the US. This is way before we could coordinate anything globally or anything. But initially I was it wasn't just me saying, oh, hey, I have these reconstructions. It was also, I was saying, I have Invasion of the Dinosaurs, I have Color Ambassadors of Death, I've got these other things that I have really good copies of, and they were listed right along next with the reconstructions, because it's I know I've seen, because I've gone to conventions where they've been playing much worse copies of things, and I literally would walk up to somebody, do the reverse. I'd find out who was running the video in the video room, and find them and walk up to them and say, I can get you a much better quality copy. So at that point, I had kind of surpassed, and now I had all these good quality things that I wanted to share, and that was I felt like it was the right thing to do, because again, things like the crystal clear audios were just being shared. I mean, literally, that was you sent somebody a blank audio cassette, and they sent you back something that had episodes you had never heard before on it.
That was such a shift in that scene when that started happening, because I remember completely hearing about the crystal clear audios, but being more surprised that the openness of being able to share it, and that was set up in the sense that you had people set up in different parts of the world that basically they all had the same quality, and you're no matter where you're going, you're going to get the same quality back for the most part. And that was a real shift, because the way that it was in Minnesota, and really the Midwest, was that it wasn't that way. And an example of that, I have many examples of this, but Jeremy Bentham had sent me all of season 22 in its proper episodic format, because that was one of the many things that I thought, well, we're never going to get the right way, because in syndication it was, they were broken up in the 25-minute episode format. So he sent me these PAL tapes, and I hung on to them, and I didn't, I need to get these converted. And I talked to some guy in another state who ran a Doctor Who fan club, and he's like, I'll do these for you. I'm like, that's great. He goes, on one condition. I'm like, what's that? He goes, I get to keep the PAL tapes. I'm like, no. It's like, well, that's how I do it. I'm like, well, that's not how you're not going to do mine then. That's just ridiculous. And if he came back and said, well, okay, I'll send it back. It's like, no, you're not. I'm not going to, work with you at all. And, you get these characters who, they didn't, they had these quirks to them. It's not even about sending. It's not even about paying them. It's just like these little weird quirks to them that made things really difficult. So like the whole idea of what you were doing and what with the crystal clear audios, I mean, that was just a real shift, in how it was done.
Well, I mean, if you go back and look again, we've talked mostly about videotapes, but obviously people were trading audio cassettes too. And I hadn't really gotten into that because I had heard the quality of some of these audios that were out there, and you couldn't make out anything. So I really had no interest in listening to something that was that poor. Obviously, when the BBC put out Fury and Power, I bought those on audio cassette and I listened to those. But the other ones that were circulating, and that's the thing, is like, again, you had people that were, hoarding good quality copies, and somehow these like poor multi-generation copies of the audios of missing episodes had leaked out, and that's all that was being shared. And you say it's talking about like me sharing, but it's also, I think it like bubbled up from under because and I didn't meet him till years later, but Graham had made copies for so many people over the years, and Graham was never anybody to hoard and say, oh, I have the best quality of these. Literally, he was a man like, oh, you want a copy? Sure, here, take it. And because he had done that for the people, the people that were working on the reconstructions, and that they were like, they had the attitude of, well, we're not going to hoard these. We're going to share them because we shared them. We didn't give Graham something to get a hold of this copy. And Graham was very nice about like, yeah, just like, go ahead, let people listen to them. So it was, I think it bubbled up from that attitude from Graham, is like, I have the best quality copies. Yeah, I want other people to be able to hear them. Mm-hmm. So, and that was the attitude. And that was why, again, you saw people had decided, because these were that fan network that got a hold of the Crystal Clears weren't these ones that were hoarding episodes for years. They were other fans that had sometimes never done any tape trading at all, and all of a sudden they have something that's like ultra rare, and they just are like turning around and sharing it. And so they would, it literally was like, okay, let's set up a network. It's, again, made it very simple. Send me a blank audio tape. I'll copy my this onto it for you and send it back to you. And so when it very quickly turned around to the reconstructions, it was, well, just send me a blank videotape, and it's merged into videotape sharing. Because then if it was like, well, this works for these reconstructions, why can't it work for other things like Color Demons?
Mm-hmm. But that did become a different sort of thing, though, too, right? Because I mean, that was more complete stories, and I mean,
that was eventually, because the more that you started to do this out in the open, the more that the BBC starts to notice, and the BBC starts to go like, hey, you're taking money out of our pockets, and this is our copyrighted material. So you don't want to, bite the hand that's feeding you, kind of.
Yep.
And so it became a matter of, I mean, I would still share that stuff with anybody who asked, but I mean, we didn't really advertise that we did it. It was just literally just talking about sharing the reconstructions, which, because of certain people within the BBC, the BBC itself had kind of like, we're just not going to pay attention to this, what's going on, because we don't have any interest in this.
Right. Absolutely.
It was years before they even considered that they might release more. They had no interest in, 1996 to even release more audio recordings at all.
I'm curious, Robert, do you think, was it the organized distribution of it by fans that might have made them a little skittish, or?
Oh, that's absolutely what it was, because it wasn't, tape trading being done in the dark, meeting people at a convention. It was like this new online thing that, again, there were no rules because everybody was just learning about the internet, and people were going with whatever. And so, yeah, it was like, okay, we see that you're sharing this. It's very obvious because you have a web page. It's like, so, they could absolutely say something and shut you down. But I think what also convinced them was the fact that, unlike the people that you've seen in Check Lies and videotapes and other things, I mean, we weren't asking for any profit on this. We weren't saying, okay, yeah, send me $20, I'll buy a cheap $3 tape and send you something back. No, it was literally just, there was no money passing hands whatsoever. I mean, I wouldn't even buy videotapes for people. It was literally, no, if you want a copy, you need to send me blank videotapes. And we just need to stick entirely on that. You send me blank videotapes, and and I will send them back to you.
And it actually ends up costing you more in a sense, because there's that wear and tear on the machines that, I don't know if too many people really, kind of really thought of, especially if you were a heavy hub that you're just copying all the time, and that wear and tear adds up on your VCR.
And it did. And you start to notice those kind of things. And again, getting too many requests where I literally didn't have enough hours in the day to be running my VCR and still go to work and things. So that was when then, very quickly it became obvious, and not just to me here, but people in the UK and Australia, that we need to set up some type of a way to get these out there and have other people that, these. So in a way, I became the US hub. I would have like a dozen people that you could request tapes from, but they would get their copies from me, and then they would distribute it out to other people, so that I didn't have every single request coming to me.
And Mike, you're a hub also, weren't you?
Yeah. It was at that point that Robert and I began to interact, because I had gotten a few recons through some other hub source. And I thought, wow, this is awesome. It's got the crystal clear audio. For the first time, I felt like I was experiencing the episodes. And so I thought, I can't make a reconstruction, but I can at least offer to be a hub. And plus, it's nice because you're getting the latest updated recons as well.
How many tapes would you get at a time?
Gosh, it would really fluctuate in terms of how busy you would be. But I do remember at the time just setting up 2 VCRs in the basement, having them connected, and just pretty much just kept that thing up there at full time, right? Not taking apart the apparatus, but just keeping it there and recording for people. So I think the hardest part was just getting it boxed back up and sent back.
Yeah, I was crap at making copies for people. That's why I never offered to be a hub, because I just knew that, I still come across it every once in a while, people's tape that they'd given me in the late 80s to record season 26 when I got copies. And that was one of those instances. I read someone the other day talking about how soon they got like a episode of something after it aired, which was, just not too long, but it was like, that was the year. Season 26 for me was, I had a friend he wasn't a friend. I met him at Polaris Con, and he was kind enough to make copies of his PAL tapes that came from the UK, and then make a copy for me from the PAL tape, but it'd be a NTSC conversion. They were really quick. They were like, probably about maybe a month after they aired, which was a huge, very quick, and they were really decent quality. But I remember, this, once again, this 15-year-old getting on the phone, trying to ask, basically asking, well, I was wondering if I could get maybe one of the nice black and white episodes that you have of, say, 10th Planet or something like that. And he just was like, no way, buddy. No way. That's not on. It's like, we worked really hard to get these nice quality copies, and I'm not just giving them out to anybody. And it's like, I wasn't frustrated by that. I was just like, okay, that makes sense. I'll show you. But it was just weird how they just like the tone, everything, just like, what do you mean?
I remember in my trading days, the biggest frustration was waiting for the other person to close the deal, to send you whatever it is that you had promised. And it's funny because just to jog my memory, because it's been so long, I went back, looked through some old stuff, and I found an old calendar that was kind of a sort of diary-ish kind of thing, because I was marking when I would be talking to different contacts and what we were talking about. And it's funny because on the side, I can see my frustration. I'm writing about, why isn't he sending the tapes? Why isn't he sending the tapes? And it's like, I can't even tell what I was upset about at the time, but by God, it was pretty important.
Did he ever call you up and just like, hello, where's my tapes? I'm just kidding. But seriously, where's my tapes?
There might have been one or two times when I just called up just to chat. Oh, so then we'd eventually get to those tapes. Yeah. Have you got those tapes done yet?
Yeah, I that's the other part of this. Like, yeah, starting to have friendships with all these people and talking to them on the phone. Back in the day when you had to, pay outrageous fees to do long distance, not only international calls. I remember having some 6-hour conversations on the phone with Bruce Robinson that cost me an arm and a leg. But yeah, and then of course that's we talked about how like we met then through the reconstructions and setting you up as a hub, and that. But same thing with you, Greg. I met you at a convention where I don't know if that was when you had first found out about the reconstructions, but I remember I had a bunch there, and you were like, I want these covers that you have and all this other stuff, and by the end of the weekend we were hanging out and watching stuff together and that. So yeah.
You even drove. I mean, we all got into your mom's van and went to Andrew's place.
Yep.
And I remember like as soon as I got home from that weekend in Chicago, I put in one of the reconstructions. I couldn't wait to see these things because I didn't really know about them a ton. I didn't have any. I think Andrew had talked to me a little bit about what they were. He talked to me about you, but that was a thing. And I still have those covers, just so you know. I still have them. I don't, as you know, I don't throw anything out. It's very clear how this place looks, but it's magical because it's all new. I mean, it's like it's new from meeting you. It's new from the type of the way the stories are. I mean, everything about it was really new and exciting because, now, and not to diminish how exciting it is to get this stuff, but there's very few Doctor Who releases now that really excite me because it's like I kind of seen it all. Even if like Mind of Evil might have been like one of the last ones I was really excited about because like, ooh, color, something that none of us ever thought we would see. And here we are doing so. I just want to post this. Simon had mentioned at the BBC, we're threatened with the sack for saving any TV that the Beeb decided to junk. There's no audience for any old TV, said the boss of BBC Enterprises. This is a good thing to talk about when we get around to talk about missing episodes. And I mean, because that would be, just another thing is because, I mean, we know that people have done it though still. And we know that people have done it at other TV stations in other countries, saving prints or just getting them not really caring what they are, but it ends up being some stuff of interest. So, I don't know.
Even you'd think even by now they would realize not to throw anything out. Maybe they have by this time, but I remember visiting the BBC back in, 2006, and even then being shown like, yeah, these are some raw Sylvester McCoy footage that is finally, they've just said, get rid of it. It's not being transferred. It's not being converted to keep officially, but we've decided, we just need to get rid of more stuff. And so, yeah, it was even in the 21st century, they were still, just junking items that eventually, then by that point, they were making DVDs. They could have realized, hey, we can use this for deleted material. And that they just didn't want to take the time to have somebody look through it to see if there's something worthwhile to put on a DVD in that. So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, this is probably for another conversation another day, but there's a thread on Kaleidoscope's page currently about somebody who was working, I think, what ITV or one of the archival areas of ITV, who was pretty sure that when they were there in the 90s that copies of all of Ace of Wands existed. Whether or not that's just misremembering or whatever, it's still an interesting thing. And I mean, I've heard the same about Time Slip, to be honest, that that it was reported that there were color copies of those existing into the 80s. Is that true or not? I don't know, but it's interesting how late some of this stuff lasts, that we're just so close to maybe having that moment that people have that aha moment. We should keep this stuff from, everything could have been different. Everything could have been changed. So I don't know. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you either of you want to talk about at all?
No, but now you have me just really wanting a color recovered episodes of Time Slip. But, fine.
I know people are working on it, so maybe you're going to get your wish.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's obviously I don't think it's on an official level, but it's still something that's I've heard some people playing around with some stuff. So, Mike, what about you? Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to share with us?
No, it feels like we've really gone across the range. I mean, we could talk, I think, a lot more about just the audio collecting in the 80s and 90s too. And
I think we should at some point. Yeah, very much so, because that is because to Robert's point, that the first wave of that stuff that we got here was just atrocious.
Yeah, that was also in my calendar diary too. Some of those first ones. I remember Tomb sounding pretty good, but after that, they were. Yeah, I remember. I think it was either Marco Polo or maybe Enemy of the World. Getting that and listening, and finally after 10 minutes, going, I don't know what I'm hearing, but I have a copy of it.
Right, and thinking that's going to be it.
Yeah,
the idea of the crystal clears were just unbelievable. Same with even finding telesnaps too.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well, and you bring that up, and that's what originally the Bruce's Change of Identity reconstructions had a script at the bottom of the screen, because when he started working on them, he had the older version of Marco Polo, and there is a unreleased version of Marco Polo that he did that literally had no photos. It was literally just the script on a videotape with the script going on the screen. That gave him the idea, well, I could add photos to this, and that's when he started working on it. In between, then the newer recording of Marco Polo was released, and he used that for what eventually became the Change of Identity Marco Polo. But that was the reason he had started including the script, which I remember a lot of people liked it because it's had the script on the screen where others didn't. But that was the original reason behind it. It was because he didn't think people would be able to make out what was being said, because he originally started working on it with the poor audio.
Yeah, absolutely horrible stuff. Oh my God. I think we should have a conversation about the audio then at some point. That works. I do want to just let people know, if you have any ideas of topics you want to hear, anything, feel free. You can send us information at feedback@fromthearchive.co.uk. I'm on Twitter @FromTheArchive, and the rest of my stuff is there. We're working on new podcast episodes. Things move slowly, but we'll get there. Mike, is there any way that you want people to try to get a hold of you ever?
Well, my Twitter handle is Spacetime Nerd.
It's @loser, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. I'm your friend. You have to be nice to me. It is on the record. Yeah, it is loser.com. So.
So it's at Spacetime Nerd.
Yep. Yeah. So @Spacetime Nerd. So.
And you do scarves.
Yep. For my sins, that's usually what I end up doing when I'm watching archival British television, is knitting away, because why not, right?
And you do them for you. If anyone wants one, they should reach out to you.
Sure. Yep.
And Robert, you just don't want people to reach out to you, or is that changed? Or
No, that's true. I have no social media. I don't do- They can reach out to you if they were really hard up to contact me, but I don't think anybody wants to contact me these days. Reconstructions are much easier to find on was it Vimeo or Venmo? Or no, Venmo's the cash thing. It's
money.
That's not YouTube because they're not on YouTube.
You're on MySpace, aren't you?
No, I never had a MySpace. There was an AOL at one point, but I think that's long gone. And the CompuServe stuff's way gone too.
See, there's another thing we could spend some time talking about. The AOL CompuServe years there, the early internet fandom.
Absolutely.
Alt binaries, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Alt binaries, Doctor Who is still there.
Is it really?
Yeah, the news groups are still there, no, but I don't think many people post to them. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the BBSs and stuff I did for a short while. But yeah, I didn't really have, other than using AOL to host a web page, I didn't really join any of the chat rooms on AOL or anything.
Mm-hmm. Just nasty sometimes. I didn't want to. I'm too delicate for that, Mike. I didn't want to be.
It's okay. I'm here for you, Greg. I'm here for you.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Thank you, Tobias. Yes. You can find all the loose cannons out there, and maybe some of the others that I worked on too. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we call it good? Our plan is to hopefully be back in a couple weeks or something, if anyone's interested, and if you have ideas for topics to talk about, we would be open to that. It's not just Doctor Who, but we're kind of focused on stuff that we find interesting, so that we can just have casual conversations about. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. I thought this was fun. I hope you had fun too. And we'll call it good this week. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll be back in a couple weeks. And if you have any feedback or anything, kind feedback, let us know, and we'll talk to you later. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.